Call this meeting to order. This will be the Monday, April 5th meeting of the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell. I'd like to invite Jeb Edmondson to come forward and lead us in the pledge. If we'd all stand and face the flag. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Jeb, if you go to the microphone and introduce yourself and tell people why you're here. There's the microphone right there.
Hi, I'm Jeb Edmondson, and I'm here for to work on the Boy Scout Merit Badge.
And which troop are you a member of?
Troop 431.
Good to have you here tonight, Jeb. Thank you for coming.
I'm glad to be here.
Yes, sir. This time I'll call upon Betty Price.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My son was a member of Troop 431. That's a great troop. Well, a lot has been said about our nation's founding fathers and their motivation and spiritual character in establishing our country's Constitution once independence from Britain was achieved. The necessity of an organized government in America had been realized 150 years earlier following the failure of the earliest colonies that did not have laws to help them survive together. In 1620, the 41 signers of the Mayflower Compact, 37 of whom were escaping religious persecution, believed that covenants were to be honored between God and man, and these same principles also bind man to man. The establishment of our local government here in Roswell resulted from honoring the values of those before us who have lived their lives with honesty, reliability, and fairness in providing the people with a government with integrity aligned to those principles. Here is the text of that Mayflower Compact. In the text of God, amen. We, whose names are underwritten, the loyal subjects of our dread sovereign Lord King James, by the grace of God, of England, France, Ireland, King, Defender of the Faith, etc., having undertaken for the glory of God and advancement of the Christian faith and the honor of our King and country, a voyage to plant the first colony in the northern parts of Virginia, do by these presents solemnly and mutually in the presence of God and of one another covenant and combine ourselves together into a civil body politic for our better ordering and preservation and furtherance of the ends aforesaid, and by virtue hereof to enact, constitute, and frame such just and equal laws, ordinances, acts, constitutions, and offices from time to time, as shall be thought most meet and convenient for the general good of the colony, unto which we promise all due submission and obedience. In witness whereof we have hereunto subscribed our names at Cape Cod, the 11th of November, in the reign of our sovereign Lord King James of England, France, and Ireland the 18th, and Scotland in the 54th. Anno Domini, Latin for in the year of our Lord, 1620. So it is good to reflect on history as we deliberate this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Price. At this time, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Councilmember Becky Wynn. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Nancy Diamond. Does anyone in the audience have any questions regarding the consent agenda? All in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda, raise their hands.
There is an item in the consent agenda that also is included in a regular items and...
Good catch. We'll remove that from the consent agenda. That would be the...
Number 3.
Number 3. That's removed from the consent agenda, so we're approving the minutes of the meeting and the dedication of Old Surrey Place as a city street. Those are the 2 items on the agenda. We have a motion and a second to approve that. Do we have all in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. For the record, Councilmember Jerry Orleans and Councilmember Rich DiPolito are out of town with their families on spring break. On my agenda item, I have the nomination of Laura Layton to the Cultural Arts Board. Do we have a motion to approve that nomination? Motion by Councilmember Becky Wynn, second by Councilmember Ken Eigelhart All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. This time I'll call upon Councilmember Becky Wynn.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I have on my agenda tonight is just one item, approval for the mayor and/or city administrator to sign a contract with the Dickerson Group Incorporated for the construction of the water line along Opal Drive, Thomas Drive, and Charles Place in Phase 3 in the amount of $239,240. Mr. Mooring.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. This is another in a series of projects, waterline replacements using community development block grant funds. These are the highest priority waterline replacement projects that are within the improvement zone for CDBG grants. The contract that is proposed is the lowest responsible bidder. There was one lower bid received, but they had made a mistake and they withdrew that bid properly under Georgia law. So this will provide substantially improved fire protection and water quality and water supply for these property owners, and we recommend your approval.
Does the council have any questions for Mr. Mooring? Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Councilmember Becky Wynn. Do we have a second? Second by Councilmember Nancy Diamond. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. This time I'll call upon Kay Love to call the agenda for the Transportation Department.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next item is approval for the mayor and/or city administrator to sign a project framework agreement with the Georgia Department of Transportation for the Chattahoochee River Bridge Pedestrian Enhancement Project. Mr. Lowe is here in lieu of Mr. Aston Brack, who is also vacationing with family today. Mr. Lowe?
Thank you, Ms. Lowe. GDOT has sent the city a project framework agreement for the Chattahoochee River Bridge Bicycle and Pedestrian Enhancement Project. The current project scope consists of one 12-foot wide multi-use trail bridge parallel to the existing bridge that's being funded with a 2003 $3 million federal earmark. The earmark will cover 80% of the design and construction of the project. Roswell is the sponsor of this project and is currently working to secure an agreement with Sandy Springs to pursue this project. On March 17th, the Community Development and Transportation Committee recommended placing this item on the agenda, and we're seeking approval to sign the project framework agreement subject to obtaining part of the match from Sandy Springs.
Does the council have any questions? Yes, sir. Oh, no questions. Do we have a motion for approval?
Move to approve.
Motion by Councilmember Eichelhart. Do we have a second? Second by Councilmember Wynn. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? If an agreement is reached with Georgia Department of Transportation, will that be before or after we get Sandy Springs approval, before we get an agreement with them?
You could just not sign it until you get Sandy Springs approval.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
There are signatures that have to be obtained from both the city and GDOT. It's my understanding that this item will be on Sandy Springs Council agenda for the 20th of April for consideration, so it is likely those working in tandem. This would not preclude us from stopping the project framework agreement with GDOT in its process should an appropriate agreement not be reached with Sandy Springs.
Can we approve this conditioned upon getting Sandy Springs to agree to the 50% match?
Yes, sir.
Is the council acceptable to passing this with that condition?
Yes.
All right, so we will amend the motion to include that condition. So the motion would be to, for the mayor to sign this project framework agreement conditioned upon Sandy Springs agreeing to pay half of the local match. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
Next item is approval for the mayor and/or city administrator to sign 4 intergovernmental agreements with MARTA for the MARTA Offset Funds projects and approval of Budget Amendment 5540G1040510 in the amount of $1,674,500 to establish the MARTA Fund Grant Cost Center. Mr. Lowe?
Thank you, Ms. Love. The Atlanta Regional Commission programmed $25 million of MARTA capital funds in return for ARC funding $25 million of MARTA operations in 2009. The City of Roswell is eligible to program $1.7 million, $1,674,500 in capital improvements that enhance or augment existing MARTA bus service in the City of Roswell. Staff has drafted 4 IGAs with MARTA totaling $1,674,500 in capital improvements. The 4 projects are in a balanced program consisting of enhancements to the Georgia 400 bridge, bus shelters and benches, a Hawk pedestrian signal for crossing State Route 9, and the balance of the funds in sidewalks, countdown pedestrian signals, and crosswalks. The 4 projects consist of number 1, multimodal safety improvements to install sidewalks, pedestrian accommodations along Holcomb Bridge Road on the bridge over Georgia 400 in the amount of $500,000. We call this the Finish the Connection project. There's a contingency of $90,000 that's been included in this amount. Number 2.
Just real quickly, would you explain exactly what they're going to be doing on that bridge?
Yes, sir.
For that $90,000?
500.
And that $500,000?
For $500,000. It's providing a safe pedestrian walkway on both sides of the bridge over Georgia 400. It would separate the vehicular lanes of travel from the shoulders where pedestrians are currently walking with a concrete barrier. There would be some additional sidewalk that would be provided and some new crosswalks that would be provided. And I can point specific parts of that.
Is there any way to improve the appearance of that bridge at the same time? I know we've gotten a lot of compliments on the approval and appearance of Grimes Bridge Road, and currently that, if we could do something that was a little architectural rather than just those Jersey barriers with the chain link fence on the other side. We're going to be spending $900,000. I hope we could come up with something more attractive than Jersey barriers and chain link fence.
We will pursue that, Mayor. There'll be some limit. A concrete barrier is not the most aesthetic thing, but we'll seek finishes along it to try to make it a little bit more aesthetically pleasing.
Again, I hope y'all can find some way to and if it takes, I would support spending a little bit more money on this project, a little less money on some of the other projects to come up with something that was more attractive. Because if we're going to be doing the work now's the time to make any improvements to that bridge for the indefinite future.
Right.
And the appearance of that bridge being the center of the city and the first thing most people see, it's important to have an attractive bridge.
We've discussed this with the Georgia DOT Bridge Office, and I guess the original idea was to put sidewalks where the shoulders are on the bridge. But in order to do that, we would have had to remove the bridge railing and replace that, which would have added like an extra $100,000 to the cost. And so what we're showing for $500,000 with the concrete barrier is a more economical approach to that, but it's not as attractive. Putting sidewalks on the shoulder and replacing the parapet or the railings on the sides would be more expensive, but it would be a little bit more aesthetically pleasing.
I would say if it was aesthetically pleasing, I don't think it's in any shape or fashion aesthetically pleasing as it currently stands. It's pretty plain.
Yes, sir.
I wouldn't take it out on a date. For the blind date, I'd walk out of the house. Thank you.
Surely. I was describing these four components of this project. The second component is the installation of bus stop amenities at 22 bus stop locations in the city of Roswell in the amount of $250,000. There are 8 bus shelter locations. This is what the bus shelters would look like. We've reviewed that with HPC and gotten their approval. And there would be 14 bench locations. The IJA gives the city the authorization to pick and choose the bus stops that are installed.
Those are aesthetically pleasing.
This is a map of the shelter locations and the bench locations. And those that are in green are the shelter locations, and the gold dots are the bench locations. The third project is the installation of a hawk signal for pedestrians near the intersection of State Route 9 and Thomas Drive at Strickland Road in the amount of $100,000. This project will require extensive coordination with Georgia DOT. The MARTA offset funds will be used for construction, and the design will be paid for with capital project funds. A hawk beacon or a pedestrian signal is a mid-block pedestrian signal that essentially remains dark until a pedestrian comes up on the side of the road and pushes the button. There's been a lot of interest in having some sort of a pedestrian signal along State Route 9. We've done pedestrian counts. We've gone out and looked at the sight distance. There are some vertical curves on parts of State Route 9, and we've tried to find a location that had a good bit of sight distance in both directions, that had a clear view of this signal. And that was the reason for recommending this Thomas and Strickland location. This is a hawk pedestrian beacon that is over in Suwanee. We took a field trip over there and learned a good bit about the details of that.
How is that working for them? What has their observation been on how well accepted it is?
It's been very well accepted. It's been very successful. The fourth project is new sidewalks to close gaps in sidewalks within 3/4 of a mile of MARTA bus stop routes. As well as new countdown pedestrian signals at 19 intersections and new crosswalks at 3 intersections in the amount of $824,500. The current project funds approximately 40% of our sidewalk gap needs that meet the requirements of the MARTA offset funds. Any MARTA offset funds remaining after completion of the projects will be reallocated to the sidewalk gap closure project at a later date. The schedule has been that in February, MARTA approved the collection of the projects. In March, ARC programmed the projects into the Regional Transportation Improvement Program. We're seeking council approval tonight for the intergovernmental agreement. And then in April, MARTA would approve the IGAs and the city could start funding the projects. In June, at the Transportation Committee meeting and the Mayor and Council meeting, we could seek approval for on-call engineering contracts to begin designing the projects. And then in the fall of 2010, we would begin construction of these projects. That summarizes the recommendation.
Do we have flexibility after, if we pass this resolution as written, between moving money from one project to another?
Yes.
So we can make adjustments to this within these categories?
If there was one area that you didn't prefer and you wanted to do more in another area, you could certainly do that.
Thank you. Does the council have any other questions? Do we have a motion? We have a question from Councilmember Price.
Yeah, I was a little concerned about some, I won't say discrepancy, but just the numbers didn't compare from one page to another about the amount we would be responsible for the design of the Hawk. And I mean, I'm comforted that we can move some of these funds because I'm not sure we've fully analyzed the need or desire to have the Hawk in that location. I've asked a number of questions and haven't gotten satisfaction for me, and I'm just real concerned that would not be a good location for our expense, whether it's $25,000 or $40,000, it's not clear. But if indeed we could move it to the sidewalk projects, then that'd be
You
great.
could do more sidewalks if you wanted to.
Okay.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion? Motion by Councilmember Wynn for approval. Do we have a second? Second by Councilmember Eichelhart. All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. We're adjourned. Oh, we pulled an item off consent. I apologize. And that is transportation also, isn't it?
This is the budget amendment. This item is approval to reallocate funds from the Midtown Roswell-Hogwaller Creek Value Village Pedestrian Crossing Project and to establish a Midtown Pedestrian Crossing Midtown Hawk Beacon Project in the amount of $40,000. Councilmember Price, you had mentioned some of the differences in money. The $40,000 is the amount that had been allocated for that pedestrian crossing in the budget. We don't know how much it's going to cost. It could be less than 25. It could be more. So we were just allocating the total amount. The MARTA offset funds would pay for the construction installation of the Hawk signal should that move forward in its current form. So that's the differences in the funding. We do have to pay for the design, and this was a source of funds from the Midtown project that were for this specific item. So this request is approval to reallocate those funds and establish that project.
So there is currently $40,000 allocated to the Hawk.
We're asking for that. It's currently in the pedestrian crossing project at Hogwaller Creek Value Village, and we will not be needing that.
So we won't be doing that pedestrian. We're talking about a different pedestrian crossing.
Correct. And so we would be utilizing that money to do the design of this Beacon Hawk signal.
Well, what concerns me is Councilmember Price has some questions about this, of whether we should be spending it here or there, and I'm not sure whether it's appropriate to, as long as there's no hurry on this thing, is there?
But I think there's no hurry on this particular project per se. The issue is that these funds come as a package, so we need to proceed with the agreements for the $1.6 million. We can't start part of them or not. We have to send them all at one time as a package deal. So we can certainly defer this item. It just means we're deferred with getting all of the agreements signed.
I don't want to, when we say all of the agreements signed, I don't want to hold this thing up, but on the other hand, I don't want to rush to judgment either. So is it possible to move forward with everything except this? pedestrian crossing, or is it you
We
telling
can-
me it's not possible?
Well, I think an option would be to approve the agreements in their current form. We can proceed with them, but not begin design work on the Hawk signal or any component thereof until a final decision had been made. We can always reallocate the money and decide not to do it in its current form, put it in a different location, don't do it at all, and move that money to sidewalks. But we can't pull that one agreement out and then proceed with the other three because we need to allocate the $1.6 million.
Councilmember Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The thing is, this was discussed thoroughly on March 17th at the committee meeting, and it was a consensus to put it on the consent agenda at that time. It wasn't a consensus to put it on the regular agenda. It was a consensus to put it on the consent agenda. So my concern is that I think everyone was present at that committee meeting, and my understanding, I think it was a unanimous vote to put it on the consent agenda. So if we're pulling it off to make a vote, I don't see why we're just not voting on it at all.
Well,
Because we've already talked about it at committee, talked about it at length, and that's my concern.
given that logic, I'm not sure why we're here at a council meeting, but I think we're here at a council meeting to take a final vote, and the vote's not there yet. It's not on the. It's now off the consent agenda, and so I'm not of the opinion that a decision of committee is a final decision. It's just to send it to council.
And I agree with you, sir, and that's not what I'm saying, but we're missing two members, and again, it was, I thought, a consensus, but I understand what you're saying. I do have a question. If we do this, can we, if we reallocate it to the Hawk, is it locked in stone, or can we take that back out again if necessary?
If we send the project agreement that we want to do a Hawk without respect to the location, then if we abandon that and don't do it, then we are basically terminating that agreement and reappropriating the money. We can, but I think the question would arise from them that, well, why did you send it in the first place? I think it would be different if we were just spending less money, kind of like moving money around and doing more bus shelters or less sidewalks or vice versa, but this is a standalone type project, so I think either we want to do it or we don't. That's just my professional opinion.
Well, at this time, I'm not convinced we want to do it, or at least I've got some doubts. I'm just trying to figure out how to move this thing forward. I want this whole project to move forward, but I think there's a question now about this particular Hawk, and do we want to move it forward? And I'm never comfortable in voting to move something forward without that I'm not comfortable with it. And until I don't want to hold the whole project up, but I'm just saying, is there a way to hold this one particular piece? And I'm not sure I can.
Well, I think we can. It's just a matter of, and we can certainly ask MARTA. We can ask them if we only send 3. I think the idea was to get our total allocation programmed. We can certainly go back to MARTA and ask them, would they delay approval of the other 3 agreements should we proceed and not move forward with this one?
Backing up, when we said flexibility, you could move money from one program to another one, but you couldn't eliminate a program.
We can eliminate it. My point is that these are 4 separate agreements, and this is only one Hawk signal as opposed to multiple sidewalks, multiple bus shelters. So we would just be increasing a program or decreasing it, but the program still remained. If you change the Hawk outside of the location, then you wouldn't be doing it, and it would be like we've changed our mind. We send it forward to MARTA, and we say, yes, we want to proceed, and then maybe we actually don't. So it's a standalone agreement, but it is one package of an allocation consisting of 4 projects that we determined. MARTA did not say you must do 4 projects or 6 or 8. They just have to be eligible within the MARTA criteria.
Councilmember Eichelhardt.
I do know that since that committee meeting where we discussed all this, there has been additional discussion among some council members as to whether the Hawk was the best thing to do, and so I think there is some uncertainty. And frankly, the more I thought about it, $40,000 to design that is a little questionable to move forward. So I wonder, is it possible, from what you just said, to either talk to MARTA to get that agreement that, okay, we want to spend this entire money, and it's going to be on this group, but that one thing may or may not be what it actually is spent on, is the first question. And the second, we meet again next week. We have the committee meeting before the council meeting, so we could defer this till next week, and we haven't lost that much time. And I guess the key question on that is that true? Would that be true if we just deferred it a week?
I don't think there was any timeline. We just wanted to go ahead and get these agreements. They haven't dictated a timeline. 1 week I don't think is going to make any difference in the program moving forward or not. In the meantime, staff could ask Marta that question regarding this particular agreement.
We could. Is the concern about the location or is it about the hawk?
I think there are all those concerns. I think some people have a concern. I have a concern whether it's worth the money we're spending on it. I know that it's all a matter. I'm sure the hawk is a good thing, but if I'm spending money, is this the best place to spend that money? I'm just not convinced it's the best way to spend that money.
And I think that is the discussion of, the idea is great, and probably, location may or may not be the best, but $140,000 on it makes you have a second thought from some discussion.
Andrew is our transit expert, so he's going to answer your question.
Thank you, David. Regarding the discussion, staff has developed these IGAs, and we've come up with those dollar amounts. MARTA really has not had input into how we've developed those IGAs other than we can't go over that total sum dollars. And so I believe it is feasible for us to send those 3 agreements down and hold the hawk signal because all the cities have agreed that each city has a certain amount of portion to each city. So we could move forward with the other 3 IGAs and send that 4th one down later or modify one of the other 4 agreements.
I think the important thing is that MARTA understands that we want to program all the money because if we send down 3 agreements, sans the hawk, we haven't allocated the whole $1.6 million. So I would want to ensure that we have that ability to make that change later and not be out that funding for the hawk. So we would definitely want to check with MARTA about that before next week's meeting, should that be the desire, Council.
I would suggest we just allocate the money to the sidewalks, and then if MARTA will let us add the hawk later, add it later. Is that possible?
We could do that. We are proceeding on a schedule where we were going to sit down with our
What makes
consultants.
better sense, defer it or send it down with the 3 projects? Give me some direction here.
Mr. Mayor, may I say something?
Yes.
I think we need to ask MARTA, staff, this is new to MARTA, this is offset funds from a capital deal gone bad, so to speak, otherwise. So I think we as staff need to ask MARTA what is the most appropriate thing to do. Yes, sir, because we want to make sure our $1.6 million gets allocated. So I think we need to ask the question and wait, or we can give you solid answer so you can make an informed decision.
You've answered my question. Councilmember Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think what's on here right now is the reallocation of the $40,000 that we have to address too. I guess we just maybe defer that. But I'm not married to the hawk, and I think maybe we need to look at it. But my question is, since we've already approved the 4 IGAs, do we have to go back and do another vote, rescind the vote, or how do we work that? Since we did, the vote that we just did have the Hawk IGA in that vote. So I just want to make sure that whatever we do, we're doing it legally.
Mr. Davidson.
You could go in, based on what they were saying earlier, you could go in and move that money from that project, from that agreement. If you wanted to do that, you could do it now, or you could do it next week, whenever this comes back, and just change that agreement.
Okay. I just want to make
So the vote we just took is not inconsistent with the deferral tonight.
Correct.
Okay.
Do we have a motion for deferral?
Motion to defer.
Motion to defer by Councilmember Wynn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Price. Anyone have any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. We're adjourned.
Exactly, right.